Welcome to Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group. And today I have a really fun and great topic, very topical topic as things are evolving in our industry. And I've got an amazing guest who I've known for a very long time and who has a very diverse background and someone that is an expert and able to talk from the different perspectives from our industry. So, the topic today is rethinking contingent workforce management and keeping up with the evolution of our industry. And I'm here with Daniel Kalman, who has close to 20 years of industry experience, and not just in one side of it, be it on the buyer side or MSP. He started off in the agency business as a recruiter, like a lot of us have, moved into a long period of time into the buy side and then back to the MSP side. And then now he's on the client side back again. And actually in the HR talent acquisition group, but brings really strong procurement knowledge and understanding. And then, of course, based on his experiences, has the agency perspective and, of course, the program management expertise from being within the MSP realm. So, Daniel, welcome, man.
Yeah,
Thank you for taking the time today.
absolutely. Glad to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. So, talk to me a little bit about your path, and we're talking about rethinking contingent workforce management and evolution, and stand with it. Your career has evolved and weaved a path to where you are today. So, talk
Yeah.
to me a little bit about your path and some of the things you learned along the way.
Yeah, so the path is sort of the three different sides of our industry. Started off on the agency side as a IT recruiter, getting my feet wet, and from there, after a few years, moved over to MSP, did about a 15-year stint there, and then most recently, over the last few years, on the buyer side. And so having that different perspective has been very helpful and building to kind of where I've gotten myself today. Um, and then it's interesting on a comical note, right? You have sometimes this tension between the different parties, whether it's agencies and MSP or buyers, right? Because we all have our objectives, righteously so. But I do think that that perspective has led to success and getting me to where I am.
Oh, for sure. Especially on the buy side now, you're like we talked about it a little bit, but there is a governance perspective. And then to have a successful program, you need all parties moving in the right direction. And like you said,
Yeah.
different parties had different objectives, and you having that skill set and been in everybody's shoes along the way have allowed you to kind of say, hey, I understand your perspective as the agency. I understand the perspective as the program management team or MSP and or other type of vendor community, and then the technology as well. And then of course now on the buy side, you've got your side of things too that you have to think about and the priorities of the organization, objectives of the organization, that if you are orchestrating it, I always kind of say if you're the maestro and you can orchestrate this and move everybody in the right direction, it's helpful. But having that perspective is so important to be able to talk to them.
I mean, look, everybody has their objectives, right? And we all have someone to answer to, whether that's in a professional sense or maybe a significant other at home, right? But all kidding aside,
Yeah, true.
you have an objective, right? And if I'm thinking agencies, right, we're looking at profits, we're looking at maximizing placements. If I'm looking at MSPs, it's the overall service offering that they're delivering to their customers, and from a buyer perspective, I have stakeholders. I have to make sure that there's value provided to all the different stakeholders in my organization, whether that's legal, finance, procurement, HR, and so on. So having that perspective as we're talking about, and having played on the three different sides of this industry, allows me to see, okay, how do we create a cohesive unit so that everybody's able to achieve their objectives while we're still marching towards the client's objectives?
For sure. At the end of the day, the client pays the bills, right? So it's important to understand that. But like you say, everybody has their objectives and needs as well. I think often the vendors don't understand the client side, quite honestly, and being able to communicate some of the priorities and the timelines and different things that happen allows them to kind of go back and say, hey, this is the reality of the circumstance. Because everybody thinks, well, why aren't they buying today? My thing is the best thing from sliced bread and it's going to solve all their problems. But they don't see the internal, like, well, we're implementing a new ERP system or, whatever the new objective of the organization is from a sales perspective may not take priority of the contingent program, you know,
Yeah.
new shiny whistle kind of thing. And that leads into our next conversation of talking about the evolution of our industry and then how companies are rethinking it, right?
Yeah.
And there's always this push pull, and we'll get into, the evolution and some of the trends, but you also always have to bring it back to the readiness of the organization too. So let's talk about the evolution because you've seen it. You've been in it, right, over the last 20 years of our industry. And then, be on the buy side, how our companies are starting to rethink about the
Yeah.
contingent workforce management and how to do it and optimize it.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely a tremendous amount of evolution. And when I started off, we'll just say 20 years back, there was a strong appetite for service providers in the MSP space, mainly because a lot of these companies knew that they had to create some sort of a contract labor program, and they needed someone to manage it. They needed visibility and all these different things that an MSP could offer. And so there was an immense value there. And I kind of look at that time frame of about 20 or so years back as sort of the blast off, the rocket ship for MSPs.
Yeah.
But then if you look at what's happened over the last 20 years, right? Companies have said, okay, I think we understand this. Oh, we need a technology. Some companies have decided to own the VMS contract or relationship. And so we're seeing things shift up a little bit. We've seen a lot of staffing agencies say, hey, we have a curation tool, we
Yeah.
have a direct sourcing platform, talent pooling, right? We can set that up. We could be a master vendor. So I think as you look at each of these different companies out there, it's going to be customized. What works for one may not work for others. And I can tell you, our story here about how we have heavy concentration and really about two or three different labor types.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, we're in-house managed. We don't have a VMS. We don't have an MSP. So how the heck do we manage,
Yeah.
north of 100 million in spend and thousands of contractors? We can go into that. But yeah, so I think it's all customized. And I think that I would say not necessarily an upheaval of the MSP world, just like you said, it's the evolution next.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And there's always that analogy of the pendulum, right? When you talk about evolution, like there's, you know, you swing as it was such decentralized in early days and vendors were running around and it was really, the operations or each manager had their agency they were dealing with. Then it got
Yeah,
centralized through procurement, even just so that you had standardized contracts, right? And then with the evolution, like you say, the implementation of technology to automate some of the administrative tasks and have a central kind of visibility into that billings and procurement and billings and all
yeah, we
that,
want visibility, right?
right?
And we want
Visibility.
some reporting and analytics.
And then it keeps
Mhm.
swinging, and then something else came on and more policies, and it, swings way out here. And did we create a beast that was not fulfilling the objective, is actually hindering and becoming kind of a bottleneck to the objective of, hey, I have a need for a worker and I have a worker make the match so they can get to work quick, fast, and fulfill the
Yeah,
need, right? And so I think we're swinging a little back in the evolution to say, and your program is probably a perfect example of it. Without a VMS, you're managing all the transactions because you've got the maturity and the understanding of the workflows and the processes, and there might be utilizing existing systems, be it an ATS, an ERP
HRIS,
system,
yeah.
right, that can do some of these things, and you've worked it all together, that's doing some of the functionality of what a VMS was, and it's good enough. And you've taken a couple of layers out, which actually, in the reality is less layers between a worker and a job might be the right solution, right? So I think it's a very interesting how things are evolving um, as we speak, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, really a lot of this boils down to value, right? And how do we do it? How do we do it better? How do we do it more efficiently? Right. And so, things such as curation tools,
Yeah.
right? That allows us to find candidates that will hopefully be better fits. Things like testing tools. We were talking
Yeah.
about that earlier. Testing tools, making sure we got the right hire. If I don't know the quotes here, but if a testing tool costs you 20,000 a year and you're able to find one bad hire or avoid one bad hire, you've essentially paid for that technology. And so when we think about the evolution of contingent workforce, it's sort of like bolt-on. It's kind of an a la carte menu right now that we're working with. I might need a vendor on premise for a manufacturing site. I might use a curation or direct sourcing or talent pooling for our corporate functions. And perhaps maybe I use an MSP in certain countries. And being able to a la carte select that, again, that's what I was talking about earlier, customizing it per
Yeah.
client. Everybody's going to do it a little different. Everybody has different skill sets that they're looking to hire and objectives that they're marching towards.
Yeah, and like we said, with this a la carte menu, that includes program management as well. Can you manage it in-house? Do you have the resources,
Yeah.
capabilities? Is the readiness of the organization there from, internal structures and politics and governance and things like that, or should we outsource it and get a third party to help us with that? And it really is customized to the needs of an organization. The nice thing after 20 years, like we've said, the evolution of our industry, the vendor community has come and evolved with that too, and there's a lot of great solutions that you can plug and play into the overall solution that fits best for the organization. So it's really kind of cool to see that this evolution continues, right? And it is continuous. And I think it's going to continue to evolve as fast as it has, right? Going into the future with technology changing the way things go as well. So, what are some of, and I think you've mentioned some of the trends that you've seen more recently around direct sourcing and curation and things like
Sure.
that. What are some of the other trends that you've seen more recently as well?
Well, I don't know if anybody could go out to dinner and get through a conversation without talking about AI, right? Um, CT Systems, where I work, happen to make hyperscale servers, which powers AI, right?
Yep.
So yeah, so some of the trending and evolution right now, AI is all the buzz. And I think that we'll continue to see that evolve. We'll continue to see how that can be leveraged by talent acquisition teams, by agencies, by MSPs, by in-house buyers. I mean, if you think about it, there's going to be value, and there already is showing value to all of those different functional areas that we just talked about and all of those different service providers. And so as that technology evolves, we'll see them being leveraged more and more, which should hopefully create efficiencies and improve cost and things of that nature.
Oh, totally. And we're only scratching the surface, and it's already in our industry, and we're starting to see some of the products offerings and the vendors utilizing it within their products. But I think
Yeah,
over the next year, you'll see another leap forward that create more efficiency. You know,
yeah, absolutely.
and this is what's interesting too, is the evolution of who owns the programs continues, right? I know in the past it was heavy in the procurement side, but we're seeing that evolution, talent acquisition owning the programs as well. In your organization, it sits within talent acquisition. Was that always the case at your organization, or has it moved around a little bit?
Yeah, so we don't have a heavy procurement involvement at our organization, but I do think that the best setup contract labor operations will have involvement from many stakeholders. I mean, essentially, you should have a governance committee. Even though the program ownership may sit in talent acquisition or procurement or hybrid, that governance committee is essential to make sure that all the different parts of the organization have say, that they believe in what the mission is of the contract labor operation, and that I keep going back to it, but value, right? Because if someone sees that they have value in it, they're going to buy in. So yeah, your corporate functions essentially from HR, legal, finance, accounting, procurement, talent acquisition, et cetera.
So, I know this is kind of getting more into the weeds of your organization and how you're managing it. But how do you manage that all within your organization without a VMS?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. So the way we've structured it as an in-house is we've leveraged our HRIS. You heard me talk about earlier
Yeah.
how we don't have a VMS. We have one of the industry-leading HRIS. You're probably familiar with that product. And so we've leveraged that for candidate submissions, rec approvals, rec distribution. We then have recruiters, one in the Americas, one in the EMEA region, and one in APAC that are handling rec management. So kind of like how an MSP would
Yeah.
set up their sourcing and talent consultants, um, and handling the actual fulfillment of it. From there, we have sort of a matrixed program governance where we'll leverage HR business partners in country. We've identified a few key business stakeholders that we're here to service. And then the ownership of the program sits in talent acquisition with support from our chief officers across the program, so IT, HR, et cetera. So we've done it in that sense. We happen to do a ton of manufacturing. So we have some master vendors that sit on
Yeah.
site. And because they're on site, the reporting, the analytics, the ER matters, any sort of performance issues, all of that is handled by our on-sites. And that really covers the large portion of what we do.
Yeah.
We also have some non-manufacturing related work. That's more of a multi-source model, so it's not a vendor on-premise. And in that multi-source model, that's where we leverage our HRIS, we leverage the recruiters to distribute recs, screen resumes, and that sort of thing.
Amazing. Well, and it's very interesting because, because you sit in talent acquisition, you've you've been able to leverage some of the technologies, right? What I've seen in some other organizations, and it evolves sometimes when conversations and maturity happens, but you know, the whole idea of leveraging existing systems is always something you should look at, right? And I think that's been an evolution, especially in the economic cycle that we're in, where organizations are looking at duplication of efforts and saying, well, why do we have two systems to manage intake of workers, right? So think of your ATS and your HRIS system. Well, perfect example of that is, hey, we're in this down cycle and let's look at duplication that happens and evolves. And you've evolved now contracted back to say, well, we could use this within our
Yeah.
organization. And it's running incredibly efficiently and cost effectively.
Yeah, it's a money saver for sure. But then I think as you look at what are those tools providing, like you said, there's going to be there's duplicative efforts or duplicative value. Um, but going back to evolution, like we were talking about earlier, we're now at a point where either an MSP or a vendor needs to do more than what they were doing 10, 15 years ago. They need to
Big
be able
time.
to offer more. We talked about some of those testing, we talked about some of those curation tools. But one of the things that we're really looking at is a consultative partner, someone that could help us with risk mitigation, someone that can help us if, let's say, hypothetically, we were, going through a reduction in force, which we're not. But let's say we were, right? Someone that could help us work through WARN acts, staffing. We're looking at our vendor partners and asking for more of that consultative assistance, if you will.
Yeah, and that leads me, you're actually helping me ask you the questions that I'm thinking of, and that evolution. How do you keep up with the evolution in the industry? And having a partner that can help you is always good, but I'm a big believer in trust, but verify and do your own due diligence too. So how do you keep up with, what's going on, where you're seeing the trends? And of course, talking to a partner is always part of that puzzle and having someone
Yeah.
that can help you through that. But how do you do it, keeping up with the evolution in our industry?
So for sure, I mean, we have conversations like this, right, where we're networking, we're
Yeah.
benchmarking, and I think that there's a lot of conferences that are available out there for someone that's looking to deepen their knowledge, whether it's SIA or ProcureCon. Beyond that, I think that there's a lot of research outlets. So even though SIA does the conferences, they also do a lot of research as well.
Yeah.
Right. And that can really keep you informed with, some of the labor laws that might be shifting or some of the market trending. Of course, we talked about AI. So I think between conferences, I think between research outlets, networking, benchmarking, and a constant thirst for innovation, you can stay in front and just keep up and monitoring the trending.
Yeah, and it's a multi-prong approach to it, right? So then you hear
Yeah.
it
But
here and you may not have heard it over here. So you do have to be out there and understand what's going on and talking to people. And, we are lucky. We do in our industry, there is a good network on both sides. The vendor community that's been trusted, and there's trusted people within the industry. And then on the buy side too, you see a lot of the same people maybe have evolved from worked from different companies, right? But it's the same individuals in our industry. I always joke, once you catch the contingent bug and get bitten by it, you tend to stay in this crazy industry of ours. And so, the network, like you say, is so important to maintain the network and hear about what's new and hear what somebody else may be evolving over here and it worked for them, that you might be able to take away some of the lessons learned, right? So, yeah,
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
so important. Um, so, this the evolution, why why is it evolving constantly? And it
Well,
boggles my mind. And some people will say it hasn't changed, but it does. We've seen so many different solutions, if, in our industry and continuously evolving and moving. Why is this always evolving?
so I'll look at it from the perspective of service providers. There's ever increasing competition. And with that, there's an ever battle for market share,
Yeah.
right? If you're not gaining, then then you're losing, you're shrinking, right? And so I think that that's really why there's always going to be that evolution, whether you like it or not. You think about the capitalistic aspect of the business, right? And companies are going to want to grow. They're going to want to make more money. How do you do that? You got to innovate. You got to create the shiny objects. You got to get people to buy it. And when you do that, you gain market share. So I think that we'll always see that evolution and we'll always see that innovation as a result of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And like I always say, a good business is where there's a lot of spend and flow, right? And when you look at the size of this industry and how it's growing in terms of the amount of spend that is, because it's workers, it's the workforce, and it's the largest expense that most companies have. And so it's been a very good market because of that. And then, like you say, the hyper competitiveness of our market has evolved and pushed the boundaries too, in helping drive different solutions. So yeah, it's kind of interesting when we kind of put it that way, right? That it's been a very much a vendor-driven market in a lot of cases, as well, that's driven this evolution.
Yeah. Yeah, and how we started off, we talked a little bit about the evolution of MSP specifically,
Yeah.
right? And how at one point in time, it was, manage our labor, manage our fulfillment, stand up a VMS, give us some reporting, and it's much more than that now, right? It's buyers saying, okay, that's great, but I can get that anywhere. So what are you going to offer me next, right? And that's where that risk adverse risk management, mitigation, being that consultative partner through the strategic objectives that a company might be rolling out. We talked about a reduction in force before. So there'll always be someone out there that says, I have a solution for that. Here's what we can do. Gain the buy-in, and okay, here's the price tag, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And so, evolution, new ideas, new things as we evolve the industry and the needs of our industry and organizations change and evolve too. The the idea of how do you implement these new ideas into your program and to transform your
Hmm.
program as the industry is evolving because although the driving force of evolution and some of the new products and innovation in our industry might be vendor driven,
Yeah.
organizations tend to you know, act or operate at a different pace sometimes, and always changing it may not be the best solution for them. So, you know, from the buy side, how do you implement some of these new ideas? Like, how does it start, and how do you gain buy-in and then move into operationalizing it?
That's a great question. I think the how, that's probably one of the more challenging aspects for me personally. And I say that because there's a strong passion and a desire to implement a whole lot of these things, but they have to be fit for purpose. And there has to be appetite.
Yeah,
And so, how do I implement these things? Well, for one, it's buy-in. We start with buy-in,
yeah,
right? We gather the different functional areas to see why something is of value. And I'll be honest, out of the 10 things I propose, maybe only one or two of them get accepted.
yeah,
But if we're accepting one or two of them, we're driving positive change, we're driving transformation, and we're marching towards best in class.
yeah,
So the how I would really look at socializing across the organization and making stakeholders see value in what we're trying to implement and why and how that benefits them. And not every idea is going to serve all functional areas, but if it serves the ones that need to approve it, then that should be good enough.
yeah. It's amazing because you know a lot of it's amazing advice, and I heard maybe one or two in 10 that you propose gets accepted, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of program leaders out there that get really take it personally when their ideas things get rejected. So I love to talk to experienced leaders that go, this is the reality of it. Because then, when others are getting rejected 8 out of 10 things, don't get dejected because that's normal. You're not alone in that, right?
Yeah.
And that perspective of building the business case, ensuring there's readiness, the business case is strong, it's really transforming or helping and and helping the stakeholders that are asking for that or are going to be involved in that. So they buy in and really work with you as a stakeholder is so important to get that, right?
And sometimes I've gone up against it, where we know we need to do something. It's a great idea. Nobody's pushing back, but the timing isn't right. Right. And so I think the timing aspect is certainly something that we run into occasionally.
For sure. And I often, on the vendor side, you'll hear vendors grumbling either about the long RFP process or, hey, I was awarded this, but still not implemented it, and what's going on, or whatever. And sometimes letting them into the reality of your world of the prioritization of things in a large organization and the is timing is so important to things. And when you have those windows of opportunity, get it in, or the next window of opportunity, maybe 2 years from now, right? And that's often hard for our vendor community in our space to understand that because they've got the shiny object that they want to sell you, right? But really understanding and working with the stakeholders to understand timing, prioritization, and strong business case, they all have to align. What's that old saying? Moons have to align to make something move forward. And that's the reality of it, right? In a lot of cases.
Stars aligning. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So, Daniel, we could talk forever, as always. Our conversations are amazing, and I'm really excited of how the evolution of your program has gone and how you're running it. It is an amazing way you've evolved the program within your organization. Got to end it though. And I always ask for some advice. So, we've talked about rethinking and evolution, rethinking contingent workforce management, the evolution of
Mm.
programs and evolution of our industry. It's a big, meaty topic and it can be overwhelming. So I always try to end with, hey, if I was starting out in the program, either first gen or taking over an existing program, and I want to evolve or transform or rethink, what's some of the little nuggets of gold or takeaway to the first steps they should be taking and thinking about?
Well, first off, make sure you're in the right place. All right. If your passion is not there, find where your passion is and run with it. Let's assume that the passion is contract labor operations.
Yeah.
What advice would I give? Avoid cruise control. Don't just come into an operation and say, oh, this is how it's done. Challenge it, challenge the status quo. Healthy challenge, diplomatic challenge. But then we also talked a little bit earlier about how do we stay in front of trending, right? And so using some of that mentality, we can utilize research, we can utilize nuggets that we get from a conference or from networking or from benchmarking. And we're able to take those pieces and maybe we choose one or two, right? Create your wish list. And select the ones that you think the timing is right, the greatest impact, the greatest value, and I would run with those items. But I wouldn't underestimate the power of networking, the power of these types of events that we're going through right now. There is a tremendous amount of what we don't know out there. And unless you go out there and find it, it's not coming to you.
Yeah. And with that, I think there's a tremendous willingness to share ideas and thoughts between leaders. And so, yeah, that networking is important, getting the research, starting out, and then you've nailed it on the head. Be in an organization that, will allow you to implement evolution and share your passion for this and then challenge what the existing program
Yeah,
is and think about it as we go through. So amazing nuggets of gold, Daniel. I can't thank you enough for your time. So once
absolutely.
again,
Thank
thank
you,
you so
Jeff.
much.
It's a
Awesome.
pleasure.